All right, great afternoon, Kentucky Realtors. As I always say, each day we walk and we talk like the realtor leaders that we are. And the question is why? And the answer is because that's who we are. We lift as we climb, Realtor family. We have an outstanding group of leaders that have volunteered their time for this Realtor Town Hall. And for that, we're more than just simply appreciative. This town hall has all the elements of a great movie. It has, well, education, it has real estate, it has saving and leading lives, the crisis of a pandemic, and it has bourbon too. Yes, it's got bourbon too. But it also shows how interconnected we all are and how great leaders like you prepare. And when the call comes, how you answer that call. So again, we're honored to have tremendous leaders that have answered their call to lead through different crises. And also joining us on the call, as usual, we have our CEO, Steve Stevens. But as I go into our introductions, the first person I will introduce is Colonel Retired Mark Erwin. Served in the United States Army for over 25 years, culminating his career as Chief of Staff of the United States Special Operations Command. After being commissioned into infantry from ROTC at Wake Forest, he held leadership positions in mechanized and airborne infantry, to include command of the 82nd Airborne Company in Desert Storm. In '95, Colonel Erwin was selected into and commanded the Army's most elite counter-terrorist unit. After 9/11, Colonel Erwin became a key player in the global war on terrorism. He deployed numerous times to Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries throughout the Middle East and North Africa, leading our nation's most sensitive operations. And since his retirement in August of 2010, Mr. Erwin has been involved in multiple international business and security initiatives and is currently president of the Karakoram Group, which uses the world's most experienced special operators to conduct risk analysis and security support to commercial and governmental entities globally. Additionally, he was recently appointed to be president and CEO of Bardstown Bourbon Company in Bardstown, Kentucky. Next, we have our very own Elizabeth Mendenhall, a realtor from Columbia, Missouri, who was president in 2018 of the National Association of Realtors. She's a sixth-generation realtor and CEO for Remax Boone Realty, and has been in the business for more than 20 years. As president in 2018, she helped drive bold innovation specifically aimed at heightening NAR communications, technology, and advocacy strategies. Her accomplishments, which are really too numerous to to give, also include championing fair housing and positioning realtors as technology advocates to further emphasize the critical nature of the role of realtors that we provide in the industry. Elizabeth represents the association and NAR's leadership team, presenting to realtors and industry audiences, both nationwide and abroad. And throughout her years of service, she has, again, earned numerous industry accolades. And I'll just give some of the offices that she's held. And those leadership positions at the state and local realtor associations, the Women's Council, including 2010 president of the Missouri Realtors, 2003 president of Columbia Board of Realtors, and the 2004 president of the Women's Council in Missouri. Active in her community, she serves on the board of directors of Columbia Chamber of Commerce, the local United Way, and Job Point. And then we have Dr. Marty Pollio. He assumed the role of the acting superintendent of Jefferson County Public Schools of the district in July of 2017. He was named superintendent on February 11th of 2011. He oversees the Jefferson County Public School Districts of over 101,000 students, one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, with 112 elementary schools, 35 middle schools, 40 high schools, and a budget of over $1 billion. For 20 years, Dr. Pollio has dedicated his career to serving the students of JCPS. He is a longtime administrator and educator. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Lamont Breland, our moderator. Thank you so much. Again, panelists, for being with us.
Well, thank you, Lester, and thank you, each of our panelists, for being here today. And thank you, Kentucky Realtors, for showing up to our 5th town hall, which is Leadership During Challenging Times. So I want to start off and ask each one of our guests the same question. And Elizabeth, I'm going to start off with you. How has your role as a leader and leadership in general changed in the past, say, 45 days or so?
There we go. I'm loving right now, trying to listen to anything I can, try to get as much information I can, trying to just keep learning. And I was listening to a John Maxwell podcast the other day, and he equated this to kind of what's happening and the fact that it feels like we're being very instructional because we're talking to everybody about, and as far as my brokerage goes and just as far as the real estate industry goes, like the loan programs, how to sell homes more with virtual, how do we do things differently with video, and he said, it feels instructional, but what it really is it's that we're more accessible and we're more available to those people who need us the most. And that really resonated with me because I know I've tried to reach out and call every single one of my agents. I've tried to make sure we're reaching out and talking to every single one of our customers, be available to the community to provide them real estate support. And yeah, well, it feels like I'm pushing out all this information. I think the critical piece is I'm realizing what it really is saying is I'm here for you. I'm here as a resource. And so I know, like, within the next 45 days, the next 6 months, I think I'm going to dial it back a little bit on the instructional piece because there's so much of it that out there, and really try to make sure that I don't lose the accessibility piece because I feel like we're still going to need it for several months, if not the next year to come.
Very good. Very good. Thanks, Elizabeth. Colonel Erwin, I'll ask you the same question. How has your role as a leader changed and in leadership in general?
I guess, first of all, thanks for having me, and appreciate being here. I'll tell you, I think it reminded me of some of the key things I think about leadership all the time, which is communicating with your folks and building trusting relationships. And hopefully you've started that long before you come into a crisis. But for us, it's I've been in a lot of different times. We run 24/7 operations here, so I'm coming in at different hours to make sure I'm seeing different parts of the workforce and understanding what issues. The key thing for me is my ability to maintain our current operations and make bourbon 24 hours a day. That's our business, and that's what I'm trying to do. So understanding how my people are feeling and whether or not they feel comfortable in the workspace has been a big focus. The flip side, when you talk about the virtual communications, we frankly have realized very quickly that we have a tool that we have not been using, not only just to communicate, but we're doing virtual tastings with folks all around the country. So literally we're sending out samples to folks, we did one for the Louisville Bourbon Society recently. We're doing them for YPO groups around the country. We're doing them for a number of folks. And what we realized is that we can reach a whole new level of marketing and getting people to understand what great products we're putting out there with our brand that we were never touching before. So we're learning, because this is not something that will stop after this crisis stops. We'll still go travel. We'll still go do dinners to get people to have what we call liquid to lips. But this virtual space is something that we will not stop. It's been unbelievable for us as far as getting more people to recognize the great products we're putting out.
That's good. I wonder if there's any way to incorporate virtual tastings with our virtual showings. We'll have to figure that out. So Dr. Pollio, thanks for being here today. How's your role as a leader changed these last couple months?
Yeah, well, great question and great thoughts. I appreciate hearing the others on this too. And, I've really grown as a leader, I believe, through this process. So when I was a principal, I was a principal for 10 years. And as a high school principal, if you have, you can lead by proximity. And I always say that everybody is under one roof that you are leading. So it's if there is a problem at the school, and I probably did this too often and stifled some leadership underneath of me, but I could always insert myself in the area of the school where there might be a problem, be there, be in specific classrooms. When I transitioned into the superintendent role of a district with 155 schools, it was clear you cannot lead by proximity anymore. It took me 2 years just to get myself physically into every school. So you learn about how you have to communicate better. You have to develop systems and make sure that the people beneath you are spreading that message clearly. You are building ways to communicate effectively. When the COVID-19 crisis hit, that even amplified it more, because now we have 17,000 employees and none of them are physically working in a building and we have no access to them. So first of all, communication became imperative. The second thing I realized about my own leadership is I'm a big believer in system. Designing systems is the way that schools and I believe many organizations work effectively. But all too often, if we keep our thumb on people, we stifle innovation. And so I felt that this was a great opportunity when we went into this non-traditional instruction, was to tell our leaders, our school leaders, that we're not going to tell you exactly how to do this. There is no playbook to how to do this. No one's ever done this before. We're going to develop some expectations and guidelines, and then we want you to lead and be innovative. And the leaders on my team really struggled with that at first, because we are an organization right now that is built on very much laying out exactly the systems we want done, having clear guidelines with them, probably to a fault. And so as a result of this 45-day period, we have let our school leaders flourish, and we have seen innovation like we have never really had before. So it is really balancing out that oversight that you want to have, the leadership that you want to develop, the systems that you want, without stifling that innovation. And then finally, I'll say this, as Mark said, the communication piece that we have learned from this, I think our communication has actually improved. We joke more together when we're on these video calls. We seem to have had more of a team feel when we're all together in the same room. We don't do that nearly as much. So we've learned a lot from that. And I would agree also that this has now become a tool that we can use in education that we have really underused over the course of the history of education. And now we have the ability to really change how we serve kids.
Sounds like JCPS may come out of this stronger.
I think we have a real opportunity. I said that from the beginning, that in any crisis comes opportunity. And with the opportunity, which has been I'll just give one quick example. With how we've developed NTI, if a kid misses school now, the traditional way that we all went through school is you came back to school and asked the teacher for your makeup work. We now have a tool, a platform where a teacher can videotape their lesson, post it online, and a student can actually, with their laptop, watch the lesson online or review it online at a different time. They can get interventions, they can get supports. So this is really making us grow.
That's great. That's great. Elizabeth, you're a broker. You lead a company. I do the same. We've got a lot of folks around that are on this call that lead companies. As leaders, what do we need to be doing in the next 6 months as leaders to get better and help our folks?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much that's out there. I think one of the things is we have to have a lot of tolerance and patience with everyone. Everyone's on a scale, a different scale here. I mean, I'm in a smaller community. My town is completely divided. There's a march today downtown. And, I think I liked what Dr. Pollio said about the innovation piece, and the fact that, now is the best time to be completely creative. And I'm loving the word creativity versus change, because we've seen all this creativity. I mean, people baking and people doing things to reach out to their clients differently and just touch their clients differently. And I think now as a broker, I'm like, hey, how can we be more creative listing, selling, doing your business versus talking about you have to change because this has changed us. And then I think the next thing is we've got to be very realistic and focused on the trends and what's happening in our market. We're talking to everybody about financial triage and making sure they're paying a really close attention to their expenses, what that looks like. How do you do 9 months worth of business or 12 months worth of business, in 9 months? We don't know what the fall is going to look like. And so I think really staying in touch with their real estate business and also focusing on that real estate component, because as the stock market has continued to swing up and down, people are concerned about their largest asset, their home, what have values done. And because the market's been so tight, the values haven't really shifted as much in most markets. And so we're going to have to convey that information, but then also figure out how to make people and have them feel comfortable moving safely. And it's not going to end for a while. And we can't get complacent and think just because maybe we're comfortable that everyone is. So we've got to be, again, that person to all sorts of people.
Good. That's great. Colonel Erwin, let me ask you this. How do your past experiences and special operations help you during this current crisis?
Special operations is kind of a team sport. That's the way I always looked at it. I grew up playing team sports, and the military was kind of a similar fit, especially in the special operations community. I came into that community in 1995. It was always changing everything, things that you did, we were always evolving, but we basically were created to do one operation at a time. So we would gather information, we'd watch something, we'd go execute something, then we'd come back home. It was one at a time. When 9/11 came along, significant crisis, kind of changed the world for us and for special operations significantly. We had to transition from an organization doing one thing at a time into an organization that was doing multiple things around the world, Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the Middle East, Africa, 24/7. So now we literally had to change organizations. And believe it or not, things like this, video teleconferences is what we called them all the time back then, VTCs. We lived by them. It was how we had to start communicating. We had to figure out how to communicate effectively with these tools. So it was critical, based on the timing of the types of things we were doing, that these things became very structured and effective tools of communication to actually get things done. So I think all organizations now are going through that exact same thing. How do we use these tools to operate, continue to operate effectively with our dispersed folks around the world? Some big organizations have been doing this, but now we're all having to figure out how do we do that. So I think, part of it is exactly what Dr. Pollio said. We're learning more about our folks, right? You're seeing dogs, you're seeing kids, you're seeing family things that you didn't even know were out there. So the teams become stronger through this. The key to me is making sure we utilize these tools to help us communicate effectively so that we continue to operate even better than we were before.
Good. That's good. Thank you, Colonel. Dr. Pollio, let me ask you this. You mentioned 17,000 employees. As a leader, how important is culture, and how do you create and sustain culture within such a large organization as JCPS? I think I read you got 150 schools.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. I kind of consider it to be like whack-a-mole, where you think you've taken care of something and another area pops up that you have to deal with. And you have to understand that you're always going to be a part of continuous improvement. I mean, in an organization this large with this many leaders, I've come to learn that you're never there. I mean, and we're nowhere close where we need to be, but it will never happen that way, that it is constantly evolving and you're having continuous improvement. But I'm a firm believer that developing leadership within your entire organization is critical, and more importantly, developing those leaders to think and believe in the same principles, not think and believe like me, because I want people around me that will challenge me and push me and make me think differently and disagree with me. Now, when they walk out of the room, if I say this is the way it's going to be, then that's the way it's going to have to be, because there has to be a decision made. But I want people to push me. But having people that believe the same beliefs about culture, I think is so critical. And so not telling people what to do, as I said in my first part of this, but making sure that we develop our leaders to have the same shared beliefs around leadership, and really leadership in education, what we think needs to happen inside of every school, how a school principal would develop and lead their faculty and staff. Those type of things are so critical for us. And then something that JCPS has not been good at in the past is developing leadership within the organization. Our leadership development program over the past decade has been very underserved. And I'm a person who actually came from a leadership development program within JCPS about 15 years ago. But I think those are such great opportunities. And when I visit other great school districts around the country, they have leadership development programs at every level. So it's not just to become a principal. They have teachers to become teacher leaders to become assistant principals to be principals to move to an assistant superintendent type level. And so really that is the infrastructure we are trying to build, where we build leaders at every single level, and then we align all of these role groups to think and believe the important concepts around culture and how you develop it. So I spend a lot of time trying to develop our internal leaders, spending time with them. I spend time with our assistant principals, our teacher leaders, our principals, and it is a lot of time. The last thing I'll say is I found a long time ago that the people in an organization need to hear the leader's voice often. And I think all too often in large organizations, only the upper level management hears the leader's voice. And I find it hard at times when you have 17,000 employees at 155 locations. And I want to say this again, it took me 2 years just to be in every single building, that they're not able to hear your voice in person. So you have to come with innovative ways for them to do that, whether that's video messages that goes out to all of the employees about what's important. Or what I do every weekend is I write. I'm a big believer in writing to employees. I write my own individual, so to speak, newsletter every single week. And it's not an official newsletter. It is more or less 2 or 3 pages of my voice. And it's not about announcements and we're having meetings on this and that. It is essentially building culture and leadership development, because every single week I want our leaders, all of our leaders in this organization, to hear my voice so that I can keep that North Star message moving forward. And I think that's been very valuable part of the process for me.
Well, I know it's not, but you make it look easy from a citizen watching. You always look calm, cool, and collected.
Well, thank you.
Elizabeth, Dr. Pollio talks about leadership, grooming leadership, and that type of thing. Talk to us a little bit about how you're growing as a leader, and then, maybe how is NAR, how are they grooming leaders for the next 10 years or so?
Sure. So, knowing and being familiar with the Realtor organization, we have so many different components with local leadership, state leadership, but then we also have, brokers who need to be leaders and, agents who need to be leaders of teams. And so I think all of those different pieces are part of this puzzle. And I think one of the things that has happened and just exposed us to more now with COVID is the mass collaboration, which can happen. It's something that the millennials have embraced for so long. I read once that said that a 16-year-old consults with 40 people before they buy something, because they take a picture of it and they share it with all their friends. And, now because you're in your home, you've really embraced the fact that you can collaborate with so many different people. and share that information. And so I think that, that's where we get more information about our business and leadership tips and leadership development. And I know just myself, I've had the opportunity to participate on a lot of calls, like this, or Zoom calls, which helps me grow. And I've also talked to my agents about the fact that during this period of time, what's so critical is keeping your energy up and keeping your mind right and keeping you excited. So you've got to focus on what motivates, not only what needs to be done, but a lot of times when you do what needs to be done, then that motivates you as well. And so leadership can be a motivating factor for yourself, even if you're giving it selflessly and not really knowing kind of what's going on there. I think that as far as, the Realtor Association has gone, we have seen people who maybe haven't been elected to a position rise and shine because they know that they can be critical to the conversation. So I think it's going to be really important for us as traditional leaders in a traditional system, which has been, hey, you have to serve in this role, and then you're in this role, and then you're in this role, to really look and see who's on our team and who's bringing in these new skill sets as part of our team, and who has embraced the fact that they can access leadership differently, and what does that look like. And so I really hope that we are grooming people with these new skill sets, or these more creative skill sets, to be leaders in the future. I think one of my favorite books is it's a Team of Teams by General McChrystal, and it just talks about the fact of approaching things from a regimentary procedure doesn't always work when you have an enemy who's not approaching things the way you think they would. And so with a virus, you've got this virus out there which is very predictable but very new and fascinating, and so we've had to look at things differently. And I hope that I think the Realtor Association has really reacted really quick to doing that, because we're all independent contractors and entrepreneurs and we want to win, but I hope we continue that spirit.
Good, good. Our last town hall was on mental and physical and spiritual wellness. It was very well attended and very timely. Colonel, let me ask you this. What are the most important things leaders can be doing now during a time of crisis?
Well, first, let me say I appreciate the shout out to General McChrystal there. He was my boss for 5 years while we were doing a lot of that change that he talks about. So great experience under a great leader there. Look, I'm probably going to sound a lot like Marty, but to me, it's all about open and honest communications. Leaders have to keep talking to their folks. It's not a one-time thing. You got to figure out, how do you build real relationships? And hopefully you started this again long before a crisis, so that you're not doing a fresh start during a crisis. But it's all about creating those trusting relationships where people are doing open and honest communication to make things keep moving forward. Look, we had real issues here right off the bat. We had 500 people here on March 14th. On March 16th, we closed our hospitality, our restaurant, our bar, our visitors experience a few hours before the governor would have made us close it. But we chose that path, and we now had a bunch of employees that were very nervous. We committed to paying those employees through the end of April. This was on March 16th. We quickly realized that when the government program came out with unemployment, that many of these folks who were waiters and bartenders would make much more money on the government unemployment program if we laid them off. So we literally called everybody into a group format. We didn't bring everybody in. We did group calls, and I laid out to everyone the situation and that we wanted to give them an opportunity to talk to us. So then we did individual calls with each person so they could lay out their specific issues. And the majority of our folks did ask to be laid off so they could go after the government program. I will tell you, I have one dishwasher. His name's Maurice, and he's got a job here until I get fired or go away. Maurice doesn't make a lot of money, and Maurice was uncomfortable taking unemployment, and he loved Bardstown Bourbon Company. He's got a wife and 2 5-month-old twins, and he said he wanted to stick with it. So that guy's around for a long time here. But again, it's that communication that we have with folks to get us through that. And to hopefully make the right decisions for our workforce. You know, last Friday, I set up a company-wide Zoom because we're working, you know, as I mentioned, we're running 24/7, but that's just operations in the back. So that's only about 8 people at a time that are actually running the stills and keeping the machine moving. So we did Friday afternoon, did a Zoom across the entire workforce, everybody from home, from wherever they were. And I just got mic'd up and I went walking around talking to the ops folks. So the sales folks that are in 12 different states, the finance folks, the HR folks who are all working from home, who are proud to be a part of this organization and actually enjoy coming to work, they could see and get a sense of what was going on. And it was a big hit, and now we've been asked to keep doing those. So Marty talks about communications. Now I'm stuck getting mic'd up and rolling around talking to people on a regular basis. So that's you know, you can't over communicate for sure as a leader during crisis, or in my mind at any time when you're leading an organization.
Good stuff. Elizabeth, I know you've got to run to, and I think you're still on. I know you've got to head to another Zoom call. Let me ask you, since you have a crystal ball, I think I see it behind you. What's the forecast for the real estate market?
I think, you know, we came into this with a lot of pent up demand, a lot of low inventory, which is a unique place to be coming into a crisis like this. You know, if you look at some of the pulse polls that NAR has been doing, sellers and buyers are talking about delaying their decision for months, not years, or not indefinitely. So again, I think it's imperative upon us to contact and be in contact with our clients. You know, several of the cities and municipalities kind of put a lag on construction even, and so that inventory is still tight. You know, it seems like we're going to kind of have a break here on rates for a while because everybody's understanding real estate is the venue which can bring us out of this. But the unemployment lags are going to be significant for a long period of time here. But what that does mean is it does mean that people are shifting, and whether they're shifting up or whether they're shifting down, you know, shifting in and out of their commercial space, whether because they need less space because they have less business, or whether they need more space because they need more social distancing. You know, I think it's just imperative that we are talking with our clients about their real estate needs, because there's going to be a lot of them, and there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And so we've got to be sharing loan information, rate information, you know, commercial information all along the way with them so they can make the best decisions.
Great. Elizabeth, thanks for being here, and thanks for all you do for NAR.
All right, love our realtors. Right. Bye.
See ya. Dr. Pollio, let me ask you this. When it became obvious that our seniors were not going to be able to graduate, what went into the decisions to kind of come up with a plan B?
Well, I'll say this a little bit about the whole NTI process, which is non-traditional instruction. You know, and I think it says some things about leadership, and especially in times of crisis, of being nimble and flexible. It was about the last day in February, maybe February 26th, 27th. I remember watching the news that night and hearing a lot about the growing coronavirus crisis on the West Coast. And so I came in and called my team together that next day and said, I think we're going to be confronted with this coronavirus crisis, and it's going to impact schools sometime in the future. At that point, I was thinking 4, 6, 8 weeks. Really wasn't sure what it was going to be. But we put together a plan, and it was really focused around cleaning schools. You're bringing in our health director and those getting in touch with local health department. But there was no way anticipating the quickness at which it would impact us. And so by the middle of the next week, I was canceling all out-of-state travel, all out-of-county travel. And these are difficult decisions. This was schools and families who had paid for trips to go to Europe. And I mean, the amount of mean and just nasty emails I got about how, and this was early the week, about March 9th or 10th, about how could you cancel these trips? And thank goodness I did, because by the next week, everything was shut down. But by that Thursday, we were canceling school for the following Monday for 2 weeks and leading into spring break. I originally thought at that point we would be probably back in school at some point. I wasn't sure. And I was not a fan of going into this NTI instruction because of the amount of kids we have that don't have access to Chromebooks, laptops, iPads, and more importantly, don't have access to connectivity in their homes. And so it's a real equity issue for our kids, and I know achievement was going to be impacted. Within about a week, we knew that this was going to be for the rest of the year. We didn't come out and say it, but the writing was on the wall. It was clear. We had to make a plan to address our kids because we couldn't go from March 12th to August 12th without learning. So we had to build a new type of schooling online for nearly 100,000 kids in a 2-week period, have every single school build a plan, and then really support our seniors. And so, our seniors are heartbreaking that they're not able to go through these things that are so important. But I think, Lamont, one of the most important things that I keep front and center at all times when I do this, despite whatever the negative feedback I get, is what is best for the health and well-being of our faculty, staff, and most importantly, students. And making the decisions around that. We've seen time and time again around this country where decisions have been made that have been negatively impacted students and staff. So despite whatever learning we're going to have to make up, we have not had a major impact on JCPS, knock on wood, with the coronavirus. And I think it's because we acted quickly, decisively. Just like Mark, we sent we sent our staff home to telecommute well before we were told to do that. And that includes jobs that are very difficult to telecommute. A school custodian cannot telecommute, but we put them on emergency days because of the health and well-being of our faculty, staff, students. And I think that's so important about culture. So, when in doubt, I always fall back on what's best for the health and well-being of all of the JCPS family. And then I'll take whatever responsibility after that. And so it's been difficult for our seniors. We'll continue to honor them and support them in the best way that we possibly can. But keeping our students and staff safe is my number one responsibility.
Well, good leadership is certainly not a popularity contest, and it can be a lonely job. I'm going to ask you both this question as we kind of wrap up here. How do you envision, and Dr. Pollio, I'll start off with you, how do you envision reopening, and do you see any long-term or even permanent changes down the road?
Yeah, that's, I lose a lot of sleep for many reasons, but this is one of the reasons I lose a lot of sleep over is what the return is going to look like. Because the CDC guidelines that they're giving to schools are quite candidly pretty frightening with the logistics of how we would make that operate. And so here is the guidance we got recently from the state. Be prepared to start school early, be prepared to start school on time, and be prepared to start school on late. So we are now been given the guidance that we could start school anytime from the end of January through Labor Day. Also be prepared for any further interruption in the school year because it's likely that it will pop back up and we might have to go into remote instruction. Also, be prepared to have kids wear masks every day to school along with staff. Have kids where you might be bringing in half of the school one day and half of the school the next day, and be prepared to take their temperature as they enter the door of the school. So all of this obviously built to a logistics nightmare, especially in a large district. I think things like this that I don't think all too often cross-governmental agencies don't collaborate well. And so when we get the recommendation to, as a student walks in the front door of a school, take their temperature. And so, my response to that is, well, first of all, they've been on a bus for 30 minutes with 50 other kids. So I don't know, how that, I think the purpose is already gone there if they've been on a bus with 50 other kids. Second of all, what do you do if they have a fever? We know in an elementary school, on any given day, you might have 25 or 30 kids with a fever. So what do we do with those kids? We can't just say like a Kroger, I'm sorry, you have a temperature, you can't come in. You know, they're our responsibility at this time. So, and then the on and off part of it. So if we went every other day, half of our students, how is the workforce? How are parents going to manage work with that? And so I just say to all of these that although that's daunting, we'll be up to the task. We'll do whatever we need to support our kids and make it work. I think it's just going to be, I think this is what I tell my staff. We will not go back to any sense of normalcy for a while. And I don't know if we should ever go back to the way school was before. This is our opportunity to change things. And so to innovate and do things differently and come out the back end a better organization. And I think we're planning to do that. Right now, we're in the midst of planning, okay, we can't have summer school and summer programming for our kids. So how do we do a virtual summer learning program for our kids? And we know that kids are tired. They're worn out with being on a computer and doing lessons online. So we can't do the same thing. We've got to be innovative. Can we have a robotics program through, you know, just like Mark said with the Bourbon Club online? These are things we're going to have to do in not bourbon. I'm sure plenty of adults would drink that, but these are the things we're going to have to do things differently and think differently. But you know, the future, the immediate future is concerning into how we'll manage it. But I know my team will step up and we'll meet whatever the challenge is. And I think become much more innovative as a result.
Good. Colonel, how about you? How do you see reopening?
We're looking at it every day. Look, everybody's getting a lot of help on how they're going to reopen. I'm looking forward to the day when individuals get to decide their own risks again and what they're willing to accept. But we're starting already. We started selling our bourbon pickup the other day. So literally yesterday, we started drive up selling bottles. May 20th, we will open our retail again, and then we're being thoughtful about when's the right time to open up our restaurant. You know, we've got a unique experience here in Bardstown in the bourbon industry. Not many folks have a restaurant like we have in the distillery and a full bar. So there's a lot of people who are ready for this thing to open. So we're going to have to figure out how do we play within the rules that will be set for social distancing, and, you know, wearing masks in a restaurant is going to be interesting to me. So I don't know how we're going to get around all that, but you know, we'll play by the rules. We'll do what we need to do. But at some point, I look forward to when, again, people are assuming their own risk, and we're setting an environment for people to be able to do that, and we can operate in a safe way. But it's going to be tough for a while in the restaurant world for sure, both people who are nervous to step into that and for folks who run hospitality to figure out how do they play by all the rules that are going to be in place for keeping people safe. Again, I think there's so many different things out there about this issue. It's hard to know what is the right guidance. We've got, you know, part of the Kentucky Distillers Association who's helping work with to figure out our industry and what we should and shouldn't be doing with our visitors' experiences and our retail. So we'll see where all of it goes, but we'll open up in a slow manner so we can keep everybody safe in our environment, with the main point of my goal is to keep my business operations moving forward. So nothing on the hospitality side can be allowed to impact our ability to make bourbon.
Great. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple questions from our viewers here. So I'll ask you both this question: any leadership role models, folks that have inspired you throughout your career?
And I got a ton of them. One was just mentioned earlier. We're actually doing a virtual tasting this weekend with a group called the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. And there's a whole slew of my old bosses and teammates that are going to be on that, trying to figure out how the heck Erwin got into the bourbon world. But Gentleman Crystal was mentioned. He's a fabulous leader who changed our world, not only in special operations, but in inside of would have continued to change things inside of government. I could list a number of folks after him. And then in my commercial world, I was fortunate enough to become good friends with a guy named John Mack, who ran Morgan Stanley through a different crisis. And he's been a great friend and mentor to me in the business world.
A group of special ops people drinking bourbon. I wouldn't want to mess with those guys and girls.
It'll be fun.
Dr. Pollio, how about you?
Yeah, I think all too often we often think about leadership is what we learn positively, which I have a lot of those, but also I think we have a lot of opportunity many times to learn what not to do from the people that we're around too. And I say every time that you are under someone else's leadership, you have that opportunity, if you are reflective, to think about what are the leadership things you would take away in a positive way, and what are the things you would do very differently. And one that comes to mind that has been very prominent in my entire career was Bobby Knight. I was some might not know this, some may. My first life, I was going to be a basketball coach. That's what I wanted to be. My dad was a basketball coach, wanted to be a college basketball player, but at 5'6", 120 pounds with a marginal jump shot, not a lot of colleges out there clamoring around for that. So instead, I decided that I was going to go learn to be a coach. And I just wrote to about 10 or 15 of the best coaches in the country at the time, Dean Smith, Bobby Knight, Denny Crum, Eddie Sutton, and landed on going to work for Bobby Knight for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So I was a student manager and a student assistant during a 4-year period for Knight. And I often think about the lessons that I learned, and I go back of what to do and what not to do. And just briefly, the thing that I consistently took away from him more than anything, I've never seen anybody so focused on we are going to be really good at a few things. He didn't try to trick anybody. He didn't care if anyone knew what was coming. But he developed a plan of what Indiana basketball at that time would be good at, which was motion offense and man-to-man defense. And we will spend no time working on anything else. And I mean, every day of every practice was devoted to develop, and we will be great at those things. And so from that day forward, everywhere I've went, and it's interesting because the next basketball coach I worked for tried to do 200 things and was marginal or submarginal in all 200 of them. And it just, really solidified in me as a leader, figure out what you want your organization to do and be good at, message that, communicate it, and in basketball terms, drill it until everyone knows it. On the other side of that, I also learned how not to treat people because it was very clear to me at that time. I mean, often I thought, this is just basketball. In the end, this is basketball. And I'm not so sure if people inside an organization that are giving their lives to you should be treated like this. And so, I took that lesson too, and I can be, and people around here, if internal and on my team would say I'm tough, I drive hard, we work extremely hard, and I have very high expectations. But I also have to reflect back oftentimes and say, I've got to make sure I would never do to that level of Coach Knight, but that I'm also making sure that I'm treating people the right way, honoring them and respecting the work that they do as people. And so there's a lot of them, but that is one that is always on my mind from a young age and an experience I had.
That's great. Speaking of sports, we have a question. Will there be any summer sports at JCPS?
Very unlikely that there will be any summer sports. So you can write off any practice starting at July 15th. That's almost absolute no possibility in my mind. I am hoping that we would start fall practice on August 1st. and then probably have 3 or 4 weeks of practice, and then maybe an abbreviated fall season for all of our sports. But I think that's still very tentative, you know, and I think that's tentative at the college level as well. So I'm really crossing my fingers for August 1st, because I know for the spring sports how much that crushed the kids who wanted to, who work all year long to play that baseball or softball or track, and did not get the opportunity to compete.
Good. Last question. It's kind of on the mechanics of wearing masks. If that is required, will the district provide those masks for students?
Yeah, I mean, we will have to, but I mean, once again, here is the issue that we will have. That's 98,000 students. That's 98,000 masks that we would hope a lot of kids would bring with them. But in the context of our world and the challenges that we face with children, especially those, I mean, we have 6,000 homeless students in JCPS alone. 6,000 kids in the city of Louisville right now are considered homeless, and it will probably be more by the time we come back. And that's a frightening statistic when you think about that every day they come. And so would we expect them to also bring masks with them? Some may, but we're going to have to, how many masks are we going to have on hand on a daily basis? And is there an infrastructure to support that so that we can have that many masks every single day ready for kids? We will have to do that, but obviously I'm very concerned about how that would look.
Dr. Pollio, thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do for our kids and for our community, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you all.
Yeah, and
great hearing from you, Colonel.
Colonel, I'm going to give you a last shameless plug on how we can buy some bourbon.
So come on down to Bardstown. We'll do a drive-through, and we're also obviously in a lot of liquor stores there. You know, our sales, the whole industry, you hear about talk about sales on the climb. That's typically more the bigger established brands, obviously, who people are bulking up on. But we appreciate you thinking about our products. It's tough for young brands right now. You know, we started selling our brand in March of last year. We've had a great start in 6 different states. Kentucky's been one of our best, obviously. But it's tough for young brands because now people are going to what they know, and with liquor stores, many going to just curbside pickup, it's hard to think about or find a new brand. So we certainly appreciate that. We're in a good spot because of our business model of making a lot of bourbon for others. 95% of the 110,000 barrels we made last year are actually for other brands. We've got 26 other customers that we make bourbon for. But it's tough out there for young brands right now, but I appreciate you thinking about ours. We'll be here regardless. When this thing's over, we'll be back on the shelves for you and ready to go.
You guys have a slick website, and it geolocated me and pointed me about 3 blocks down to my local Party Mart, so I could go buy a bottle of Fusion.
There's plenty of opportunity for that, and before long, you'll be able to buy online from us directly based on our House Bill 415 that was passed a month ago. So we look forward to it.
And Colonel, I've always heard you military guys don't like for people to say thank you for your service, but I can't not say it. Thank you for what you've done for our country.
I appreciate that. I always defer that to the families. The families are the ones that put up with it while the soldiers go off and do what they're paid for. So
yes, sir.
Families are the ones that I thank. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Pollio and Elizabeth Mendenhall. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to our 2020 president, Lester Sanders.
Thank you so much, Lamont. Colonel Erwin, I have not tried your bourbon yet, but I'm told that I really need to. Lamont has been putting in great plugs, but I do as well. I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for giving us the time to spend with you today to get to know you a little better. And I think each member on the call here would certainly say thank you for all that you do. And then for President Mendenhall, she may not be on the call, but she has a history of visiting Louisville as well. So she's not a stranger to Kentucky. we reached out to her and she responded. So thank you again, Elizabeth, for spending time with us today. Dr. Pollio, we have a little bit of a longer history. Even in our earlier mentoring days with JCPS, you were never in the easiest schools. You just took the schools and you did the work that had to be done there, and we have supported you as you became superintendent, and we continue to support you now. Again, thank you. And I end with one last thing, and that is just thank you to all the mothers that are there as well, and happy Mother's Day this weekend.